Welcome to the Ethical Humanist Society of Chicago. In just a moment, I'll be introducing Bethany Barbouti, who will be speaking about sustainable shopping, voting with our dollars to reduce waste. But first, to enhance our shared understanding of humanism, let me share an excerpt from an article in the winter 2023 issue of the Humanist magazine. Humanism is a simple thing to understand in theory and can often be challenging to put into meaningful action. It is a philosophy that is informed by science. It is compassion-centered. It affirms a life that doesn't require belief in the supernatural. Critics of humanism often use it as a synonym of non-belief, equating the position with atheism, which does humanists everywhere a disservice. Humanism is not about what is not believed in. It is about positive, meaningful beliefs such as the inherent dignity of human life and the joys of art, science, and culture. That's from the article Humanism 101, Defining an Action-Oriented Humanism by Luciano Gonzalez Vega. Bethany Barbouti is on a mission to reduce waste in the community. She previously worked in data analysis for the US government and later in the humanitarian aid field as a researcher at the UN World Food Program and as a project manager overseeing agricultural and livelihood restoration projects in the Middle East. She holds a master's degree in sustainable food studies, and her deep love and concern for our environment led her to want to study and work in the sustainability field. After seeing more environmentally responsible ways of living and shopping throughout her travels, she was inspired to open a store that aligned with those values. Our programs address a wide variety of topics, including current events, philosophy, arts, and sciences, to name just a few. Today's presentation is part of our ongoing program relating to the environment. And I'm very interested to hear what Bethany has to say because I'm an occasional shopper at her store. So welcome, Bethany Barbouti.
Thank you so much for the lovely introduction and for having me today and for coming to see me speak. I really appreciate it. So sustainable shopping, I think we all have been forced down a path of the way that society functions now to be buying everything in single-use containers all the time, from your dish soap, your hand soap, to your spices, to any of your food products, to your, now they, wrap potatoes singularly in plastic, each one of them. Yes, and it's becoming a greater and greater problem. I'm sure everyone has seen photos like the one above of just these massive plastic garbage heaps and the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, all these, the destruction that it's causing to the animal world and things like that. So it's become a deep passion of mine for a number of years now to try and find a better way to do things. Obviously, I think we all know, and I think one of the biggest criticisms of sustainable shopping is that it's not maybe the most effective to put the burden on the consumer, that it needs to be on the larger corporations, which are responsible for so much of the waste. That is absolutely true. However, you don't influence change in large corporations and in policy without hitting them where it hurts, which is in their bottom line. So the number one way that we can individually influence change is by changing the way that we behave and demanding that things get done differently by shopping and choosing to spend our money in ways which are more sustainable. So that's, in my view, that's the way that we on an individual basis can start to influence change. So we'll go to the next one. So we have a big problem. The United States in particular is considered the most wasteful country per capita. China and India combined have 8 times our population, but they produce only 2 times the amount of garbage that the US population produces, which is, quite a huge, it's pretty bad. So zeroing in on plastics in particular, we're also one of the leaders in terms of plastic production, and we rank second behind China in terms of how much plastic we produce each year as well. So I think this is one area where sustainable shopping is still failing, is because we're doing our best to not, buy into places and support places that have plastic packaging. But as someone who purchases wholesale from places that say they're sustainable, it's incredible the amount of times I have to ask them, do you wrap anything in plastic? Are you sure you don't wrap anything in plastic? And they insist, no, and then it comes in plastic. And it's extremely hard to avoid, and everyone is just, it seems like pre-programmed to just go down this path of everything has to be in plastic or else it's dirty, or it's also, I think, that kind of been ingrained in a lot of humans that if it's not wrapped in plastic, it's unsanitary, and you're going to catch something from it, things like that. So trying to redirect the thought process on both sides of both on the consumer side, but also on the back end, is a real struggle, and something that I think a lot more businesses need to demand. I think Aldi is doing a great job, so they're now going to be demanding that all of their producers don't give them single-use plastic containers anymore, which is amazing. I think it's by 2025 that they are going to be implementing that. So it is happening, but it's slow going, and I think a lot of larger corporations, they don't seem to really care, and they don't want to take the time. When you get to medium-sized businesses, there's the aspect of that they have all of this infrastructure set up around plastics. So asking a company that's not, Coca-Cola or these big giant companies that have billions at their disposal to change all of their infrastructure is also a really huge ask. So there's a lot needed in terms of innovation. How do we replace plastics on those levels, and how do we make it, affordable, and how do we make it realistic for, multiple sizes of companies? And I think that, again, it comes down a lot to consumer behavior. Corporations spend tons of money every year researching consumer behavior. So if all of the consumers are then saying, we don't want this anymore, that's when we're going to start to see change. So continuing with a few more ugly statistics. In 2018, the United States produced over 35 million tons of plastic waste, and 90% of it was either landfilled or burned. I think everyone has been hearing those really terrible statistics of only 8 to 9% of recyclable material is actually recycled. A lot of that comes down to education and accessibility. So we have, most of the US has single stream recycling, where you just put everything together and send it, and that leads to a lot of contamination. In other places in Europe and other countries, they have multi-stream, so you separate your own recycling, but that also takes a lot more commitment on, in terms of the consumer. However, that's where policy change comes into play. If you're caught, so in Sweden, for example, if you're caught throwing all of your recycling into the garbage, or all of it into one, you can be fined for that. Apartment buildings, it's mandatory that they have the multi-stream bins available, and if they're too far contaminated within each other, then the building will face a fine, which then trickles down to its residents. So I think policy change and forcing people to think sustainably and think, it's not, okay, you're going to throw it away, but where is away? Where is away? Away is into the ground. Away is potentially making it into the river, which makes it to the ocean. It doesn't go away, it goes somewhere, or being burned, and then it's in the atmosphere. So, and I think some people think, I'm just one person, it doesn't really matter. But again, unfortunately, in the way that the structure of the society that we live in, whether it's a giant corporation or an individual person, it kind of comes down to everyone's bottom line. So financially incentivizing people to take better care of the planet, and as well as corporations, seems to be, it works, at least in certain countries, it seems to work. The US has a much bigger population, which makes it much more difficult to control. I'm by no means a policy expert, so whether that means we bring it down to the state level or it becomes a federal thing, something has to give. And also, voting in general elections, locally, federally, for candidates that really care about these issues is also a great way. Policy change is so important for us to move in a more sustainable direction. So these are some really unfortunate statistics as well. I'm almost done with the sad part. So at the current rate that we're going, plastics will account for 20% of fossil fuel demand. I think a lot of what I hear is that, oh, we use the excess, runoff of, fossil fuels and the byproducts of fossil fuels to make plastic, so it's not that bad. But at the rate we're going, so the demand for fossil fuel, 20% of it is not a small amount considering how much fossil fuel we consume globally. So if we can imagine cutting that out, I mean, obviously, I'm not saying plastic shouldn't exist, especially in medical scenarios and things like that. There are definitely uses for plastic, but single-use plastic particularly, I think, is just completely unnecessary. So 20% of the fossil fuel demand and 15% of the annual greenhouse gas emissions budget. So, and that's by 2050, which is, just over 25 years away. So that's a really scary statistic to look at. And it feels like we're on a race to get there. So I again, coming back to the individual, this is just, I don't think what anyone wants. And I think when you kind of sit anyone down and you talk about these things and you look at these photos, nobody wants that. Nobody wants this to be our trajectory, but it feels like we're kind of steamrolling on this way and no one knows how to stop it. So, having a modicum of control of that by the way that we shop and it's just so important also, I think, for the spirit to be like, I'm doing something to try and affect change, to do it differently. And we have, in our store in particular, we have so many young families and all these, young kids from 4, 5, 6 years old, and they love refilling their containers and they really grasp the idea of why we shouldn't just be using something once and throwing it away. No matter how convenient it is, it's the long-term effects are not so convenient. So a lot of it also will rely on us teaching our children, teaching the younger generation, who will then be affecting change in our wake. So this is, again, back to how much we're actually recycling in the U.S. So you can see here in 2015 that the little green sliver is what we've actually recycled in terms of all of our plastic use. So it's not great. Just generally the plastics industry lied to us. They said, recycle. But it just doesn't work. And when you talk to the recycling plants, they just don't have the capacity and the infrastructure to really handle the amount of recycling that's being thrown at them, and in the way that it's so contaminated. And like plastic bags, for example, it clogs up their machinery. A lot of these things will really jam things up, and then they have to go and take it out. So all the contamination also leads to delays and leads to machinery breakdowns, and it's a huge mess. So getting to the more positive side of things, what can we do? On a grander scale, demanding policy change, being actively vocal and organizing in terms of demanding change from our leaders, demanding change from our local governments. It's so important. Chicago right now is, again, it's up back on the table to ban single-use styrofoam, in restaurants and things like that. So it was just before COVID, it was about to be on the table, and then with COVID they said, oh, we can't throw another thing at restaurants that are already suffering. So it was kind of tabled for a while. Now it's back. Insisting that our leaders are voting for these policies and pushing them through. It's not a huge shift. It's a slight extra cost to not be putting these things into our environment. And I think, demanding it in Lincoln Square, people really, which is where the store is located, the majority of restaurants at this point have compostable to-go packaging. They don't use plastics anymore and things like that because the folks demand it. So restaurants comply because they're gonna feel it. When I'm ordering lunch for the staff, we never will buy from anywhere that doesn't have compostable packaging. We try our best to go there, but if it's a long day or something, it has to be compostable or we won't go there. And the community has spoken, so you'll be really hard pressed to find a restaurant in our neighborhood that doesn't exclusively use that kind of packaging. So I think, a community really can stand together and create change, at least within their community. And if more communities are doing it, obviously the effect grows. Our store, we have a really amazing statistic that we got last year. We have a system that keeps track of how many containers are refilled. So in 2023, our store refilled 33,000. So over 33,000 containers were refilled, which means that's 33,000 single-use containers that didn't go into the landfill, which is, for us, it really blew our minds. It's such an astonishing number. So if you can imagine if every community had a store like ours, or if Jewel Osco or Mariano's or, so on and so forth were to offer things to be refilled, that number becomes in the millions and billions really easily. When you walk through a grocery store nowadays, it's just, plastic everywhere you look, maybe a little bit of glass, but it's just plastic everywhere. So if a little store like ours, we're really not a big store. If a little store like ours can have 33,000 containers refilled, and this year we're already set, our trajectory is to beat that number next year, I can only imagine what larger chain grocery stores, what kind of difference that could make to communities everywhere. So I think holding organizations, businesses, and corporations accountable to their environmental responsibilities is also something that's very, very important in terms of affecting change. And that's, again, voting with your dollar, and writing emails, signing the petitions, gathering people, discussing things like we are here today is so important. If we want to, kind of pull back and slow down this crazy trajectory that we're going towards of just filling our planet with plastics until I don't know what's going to happen. It's something's got to give. So holding all of these corporations and things responsible is really important. Shopping local and small. Local and small businesses are really going to hear you. So if you have a local business and they're wrapping things in plastic and enough people in the community say, we don't like this, we want you to change it, they're going to change a lot faster than, Jewel. And then you're supporting, individuals, you're supporting families. So bringing things back local is just crucial for so many reasons. And that includes agriculture and food processors. So, if you go to the farmer's market, not all of them, but I know a lot of them, they no longer allow plastic bags at the farmer's markets. So, just buying your produce as it is, you're going to take it home and wash it anyway. Potatoes don't have to be individually wrapped in plastic, or bananas, or, so, again, supporting local agriculture is so important, and also in terms of kind of pulling us back from the corporate mega agricultural monocropping and the horrible way that animals are treated when they're produced on a grand scale. So supporting local is a way to again, vote with your dollar. I don't want to support these things, so I'm going to use my money somewhere else. And yeah, it means so much to local farmers. It really does. Then coming down to, instead of, reduce, reuse, recycle, repairing and reusing the things that you have, repurposing before buying new. There's kind of a wave now of these buy nothing groups and buy nothing challenges and stuff like that, it's amazing how difficult it is, but how resourceful you can be when you start asking around you, or there's all these, free box groups and using what you have, using what your neighbors aren't using anymore and things like that, as opposed to the constant buy consumerism culture that has become such a part of the psyche. I think that instant dopamine hit of clicking buy and getting it in the mail, but then it wears off so quickly. So I think there's there's also something to be said. It's a really great rush to find exactly what you need, for free or for cheap used, from down the block, or, from someone that you know, or repairing something that you have, So kind of just shifting the mindset to away from the constant consumerism, which might sound weird from a store owner, but, as a business, our policy is to never push things on people. And that's, I think, also something to keep in mind. If a business is pushing you to buy, is that really what you like? That doesn't really feel good, I mean, we carry essentials and lots of different things, and then our big thing is have a look. If you need something, use what you have first, swap out with what you need, and if you don't need it, don't buy it. So and we're surviving and we're doing fine. So I don't think the push for consumerism and to buy all the time is it's not healthy, it's not sustainable, it's unnecessary for a business. I think a business doesn't have to survive by forcing people to feel like they need things that they don't. Corporate greed is not the answer, basically. And then growing food at home. So this is a really lovely picture from one of our staff members they were reusing some. We do a bucket exchange, but sometimes staff will request them. So she grows potatoes in our old soap buckets. So again, like using what you have and growing food at home if you can, and it's possible, and it feels good generally. So the circular economy is a fantastic concept. In which case it's basically reusing and repurposing, but on a manufacturing level. So and it's something that we participate in our business, just because it's not only on the consumer, the final end user that's reusing their containers, we also reuse ours. So when we get through a big bucket or a big barrel of soap or oil, we send that back to the manufacturer, and they clean it and refill it for us and send it back to us. So we're getting rid of the plastic waste on both ends of the spectrum. So following this circle is, normally when you think of a linear economy, it's processed, manufactured, sold, used, trashed. And then you have like the recycling culture, which it kind of goes in a loop, and then trash, because you can only recycle things so many times, and then 90% of the time they aren't actually recycled. So thinking of things circularly, it's not that nothing will ever end in the trash. It's zero waste. We call ourselves a zero waste store, but zero waste is really more of like the perfect thing that we wish we could get to, but no one is perfect, nothing is perfect, and the society that we live in is not set up for zero waste. So it's more of a goal. It's something we want to achieve. And a circular economy, it's not saying that necessarily there won't be any trash, but it's definitely going to avoid a great deal of it compared with a linear or a recycling economy. So this is basically the process that we go through. The manufacturers process the raw materials and manufacture the products. They sell it to us. We use it by then selling it to the end user in smaller containers. Then they recollect our containers and sort through them, clean them, and fill them up again. And we start the process over until finally the containers eventually do break down. But it takes quite a long time, and they're always looking for stronger and better materials to keep that process circular as long as possible. It helps a lot. I mean, and that, in order to engage in a circular economy, you really have to bring it back local or regional. Regional is good. Most of our soaps are produced either in Chicago or a lot of them are in Missouri for some reason. So Missouri is not far, and it's like a one day truck, and they bring it to us. But if you're shipping from overseas or even from California, that becomes a lot less sustainable when you're thinking about shipping heavy amounts of liquids all that distance, and then you're thinking about carbon emissions, and so you get into other problems. So keeping things as local as possible is really what's going to keep things circular and keep the solution from becoming another problem, which I think we find, a lot of, people and organizations are trying to be as innovative as possible. But in a growing, increasingly global society, it becomes more and more difficult to find solutions that don't have very serious problems of their own that crop up, as we're seeing with like the electric car batteries, which is great on the one end, but then the production of those batteries and how long they last and how to destroy them, and it creates a whole new issue on the other side. So trying to keep things local, regional is essential, really, in reducing waste, in reducing carbon, and also kind of keeping community. When things get so global and they become quite abstract and we lose control over our choices, we lose control over the things that we can influence within our own lives. So when you keep things local, regional, you have a say in what you're doing, you have a say in what you're buying, none of us individually have much say in gas, obviously in gas prices or production, in what Coca-Cola is doing and what Tide is doing. They're so global, so massive that everything, anyone's opinion is just less than a drop in a bucket for them. But when you're talking to small, medium-sized manufacturers, small businesses, that's where your opinion is heard, where your voice is heard, where organizations and community can come together and really influence the way that things are done. And demand that things are done better. So that kind of, I'll talk a little bit about not just our store, but stores like ours that are popping up all over the country. They've been in Europe for a long time, and actually in the Middle East, it's kind of a way of life. If you think of like the bazaars and the souks where you scoop your own spices and your rices from those big containers and stuff, it's bringing things back to the old way. We call ourselves a zero waste general store because we really want to kind of bring back the idea of how things were done, pre-World War II, where you go to the general store and you buy how much of something that you need and someone packages it up for you, in paper or in your own container, and you bring it home. So in the photos, these are just some examples of things that people have reused. We encourage people to bring in any kind of container as long as it's clean, and to reuse things for the same purpose that they were originally bought for. So if you have a shampoo bottle and you want to start refilling it instead of buying a new shampoo bottle every month, just clean it out and bring it and keep using it. It doesn't have to be that you buy all these beautiful glass jars and throw everything you have away and start over and say, okay, I'm sustainable now. But if you have to throw everything that you have away, then that's not very sustainable. So we strongly encourage people to keep what they have and reuse it until it's not good anymore. And putting a glass jar in the shower is not very advisable anyway. So people reuse, you can see the teddy bear jar. It's kind of become like this running thing with our customers, like who can bring in the weirdest, coolest containers. And we always like to take pictures of them and highlight them. And so it also becomes a lot of fun. And we call it slow shopping because it's the antithesis of buying online and completely cold and then it just arrives at your door and you don't even see the delivery guy half the time, and it's just completely the opposite. It's really it's almost like going to your neighborhood pub or your barber. We get to know our regulars very, very well, and we know about each other's lives, and we sit and chat because it takes a little bit of time. It's a time commitment to slowing down, thinking about what you need, figuring out how many containers that you need to bring in and things like that, and then the process of filling them all up, but then having those conversations, getting to know your community and getting to know the people around you. It just becomes kind of enriching in a way, the shopping experience, as opposed to kind of this cold plastic faceless, so again, it kind of brings it back to the old general store. And when we run out of something and someone needs it, we keep their phone number and we call you when it comes in, or if there's something that you really, really want and we don't have it, then we'll order it for you and call you when it's here, things like that. So I think that's something that's really been lost, is like the genuine care within the community for everyone's needs and what everyone is going, how's your day going, things like that. So I think on both ends of the spectrum, in terms of reducing waste, reducing pollution, reducing the amount of single-use things that are going into the stream, and then also just on the human side of things, of just caring about each other again, and slowing down and having the conversations, and caring for each other, and the amount of friendships that have started within the store between people. Oh, I didn't know you shopped here, but you live across the street from me, and then people start talking and people showing each other how things work, and it's just been really lovely to slow things down. So we're big proponents of slow shopping. That being said, we are thinking of offering delivery. Which is like when we post that. But we have had a lot of requests of like, oh, sometimes I can't make it, and then I end up buying plastic, or oh, my mom isn't very mobile and can't get out of the house, but she wants to shop with you, and things like that. So we are trying to work out a way to make a delivery option available for those who need it. So this is just a fun photo, and I had to cut it, but it's actually longer, of like the before and after of someone filling up all their jars in the store. And it does get, we have, it's really incredible the amount of people that come in with this amount of jars or more. I mean, people will come in with 30, 40 containers and just get everything they need for the month. And it takes a really long time, but it's a lot of fun. and then bringing it home. So I guess, when you see a photo like this, I guess you could kind of imagine if we have 20, 30 people a day that do something like that, we're the 33,000 containers number. It was shocking for us, but then when I really sat back and thought about it, I was like, no, that makes sense. we fill up a lot of containers. So, and it's everything from soaps to bath and body to all your dry goods. We have a really large amount of herbs and spices, more than we know how. We can't even display them properly because we don't have space to do it. So it's and the number keeps growing just because of all the requests, and I think people want to just get rid of all of the single use in their life, which is where it kind of started for me, where it was, every time throwing away a laundry jug, I just felt like icky. I don't want to buy another one of these, and there was nothing available, but I had seen it done in other countries, and I was just like, Chicago needs something like this, and I want something like this, so let's just create it. And we found a way to make it work. Price comes into question a lot, I will say, particularly with the soaps. And that's another way in which voting with your dollar is so important, because these, the medium-sized, small manufacturers, it's really difficult to compete with, SC Johnson and Tide and all these companies that are just buying billions of units at one time, and having these just ridiculous price margins and markups. And so when you're buying from a small business who buys from a small maker, the price can be tough. And when you follow all of your values, it costs. If people are being paid fairly along the supply chain, if you're avoiding plastic, if you're returning containers and then sending them back, all of these things add up, which again goes to show exactly how our society is not at all set up to be sustainable whatsoever, because it's truly cheaper to just throw it away and buy it again. And that's just, it's mind-boggling. We do our best. We keep our margins low to try and keep it as cheap as possible. It's not always, and we're looking for more and more ways to be able to access wider variety of like socioeconomic groups in our community. And that's something that we're constantly battling with. We have some ideas in the works that will hopefully bring things down a bit. However, you know, the more customers we have, the more that people are buying, the bigger that these small manufacturers are able to get, and the bigger volumes they can buy, and the bigger volume discounts they get, which then they pass along to us. So again, voting with your dollar creates a bigger change over time, because the more demand there is, the cheap, you know, that's just kind of how economics works. The higher the demand, the lower the price. So we're encountering that as we go. And for us in particular, like the higher the demand, the more worthwhile it's been for us. We're starting to formulate some of our own soaps with a local formulator, in which case we're no longer going to be having the same high shipping costs. And you know, we're doing it ourselves, so we don't have to pay a manufacturer. So the volume our customers has created for us has made it possible for us to now look into being able to expand on the back end for us to produce our own things and then offer it at a better price to our customers. So community and consumer behavior can really influence change rather quickly. We've only been open for just under 3 years, so it can influence change within a small business and within a community extremely fast. I mean, fast in business terms, I guess 3 years is not it's not a small amount of time, but it's not a really huge one either. So that's something that we've been really excited about. And these are just some of our happy customers refilling their containers. So, and the setup has changed quite a bit since these photos, but so a little bit about our values. Sustainable, circular, cruelty-free, and fair. Following these 4 values at the same time is very challenging, and which is sad, because again, it just shows how our society is set up. And you know, sometimes you can find 1, 2, 3, but the 4th isn't there, and then you have to start all over again. So just trying to keep within our values it's very grounding, and it really helps us to bring the best products, like the most ethical products, to our customers, as long as we don't waver from these 4 values. But again, it comes at a cost, because it's not the way things are done normally. You know, normally things are made for, you know, people are getting paid cents, you know, for the things that they're creating. So, you know, fair, and so we just put fair, because it doesn't have to be necessarily fair trade certified, but it has to be fair up to our standards, that, you know, you can show us that people are paid properly. You can show us that the materials you're using have been sourced ethically, things like that. So cruelty-free, we're not a vegan store. We call ourselves a vegetarian store, so nothing that had any animal, I'm going backwards, I guess, but and nothing that caused any harm or death to any animals is allowed in the store. That being said, we carry beeswax and things like that. There's a big challenge with brushes, which is there's a lot of these little niche industries that you find it's very, very hard to be ethical and to have all your values aligned, because if you use natural bristles, it has to come from an animal, and most of the times those animals die to give the hair to make that brush. However, the alternative, if it's vegan, it's nylon, and that's not sustainable at all, and it doesn't biodegrade, or maybe after 500 years. So it's like kind of this weird this kind of place where your values meet and they don't cross. So it took us forever, but we found a farm that makes their brushes, a company that makes their brushes out of horsehair from a happy horse farm. So the horses get haircuts, and then those are used to make the brushes. And then they grow out their hair again, and they're all free-range horses, and they live happy lives. And we got plenty of photos and videos, and it is Chinese. Not everything in China is, you know, I feel bad, because I think sometimes China has this horrible reputation, but there is a large amount of Chinese companies that want to do things differently, just as there are here. And when we search high and low to find them. We would love to do the same here, and we also always look first in the U.S., but it wasn't available. But we found a really wonderful Chinese company that makes these horsehair brushes from these happy horses. And I should include photos. I'll add them another time, but they have just these really lovely photos of the horses getting their haircuts and videos of them running around, and then all the horse hair that's like sitting on the tables, and then how they make the brushes, and everyone is paid fairly. So of course, with anything that's overseas, you have to have a little bit of trust and faith. The local government certifies that this is cruelty-free, that it's that the wages are paid fairly, and this and that. So photos, videos, long conversations, and then government certification is, for us, we felt like we can't take it any farther, aside from actually flying to China, which maybe someday we'll do. But but sometimes, and I guess that just goes to show how hard you have to work to really find something that's sustainable. And even then, you're still having to put a bit of faith in it, that all of these things are how they always do it, and that it's not staged and things like that. So it's not easy to find things that align with all of the values. Circular, that one's kind of, we went over that quite a bit, but we're keeping things refillable. One place in which sustainable shopping really needs some help is on the food side of things. Food distribution is not sustainable. It's slow, change is extremely slow going, even with smaller distributors, because that's where it comes up, that they're all set up to package things in plastic. So a lot of times people will request, things from us, and we're just like, we just really can't, because there's no way for us to source that in any real sustainable way. And some things we kind of just have to figure out the very best solution. So I guess there's some kind of U.S. health code thing that like any kind of dried fruit has to be packaged and shipped in plastic bags. So for those, however we think about it as like, it's better to buy a big 25-pound bag in one plastic bag than for them to take that plastic bag and then create 50 more plastic bags for those little like dried fruit packs that you find. So, and then we clean out the bags and we take them for like the Trex recycling, where they make decking out of the plastic bags. It's kind of, they have it like at Target and things like that. So we work with them and we turn in all that to them when it's absolutely unavoidable. Otherwise, we just prioritize foods and distributors that are willing to put everything in paper or burlap. So that's the food industry needs a huge overhaul, and again, that's where policy change comes in, like health code, and a lot of FDA policy makes it really difficult for things to be reused. They just really want everything to be single use. It's almost, I like to call it like performative hygiene, where it's just so far beyond what's necessary to keep people healthy that it just doesn't make sense anymore, and it's so unhealthy for our planet. But as we continue to ask, and there are certain suppliers that'll come back to us and say, like, or a new rep will start and they'll say, oh, we want to work with you, and we'll say like, well, have you changed this and that since the last person I spoke to? And they'll say no, and we'll say, well, then what are you doing here? Like, we're not going to change our minds before you change your setup, and that's just the way it is. So, and then sustainable. Sustainable is kind of this grand word with many definitions, but for us, it kind of is an all encompassing of the other three values. But palm oil free or only sustainably sourced palm oil, breaking down all the ingredients of what we have, and making sure that all the materials used to create the things that we sell in our store have been obtained in a proper way. It's also it's just very, very difficult. It's amazing all the things they put palm oil in. Yeah, so I guess, I'm sure from even doing your own shopping, for those of you who have tried to kind of be more sustainable, even that, going to the grocery store, you'll double your time that you spend there just reading these tiny little ingredients, and it's kind of a nightmare. So, so we try to do that. We try to take that work at least out of it for our customers. And we're very transparent. So anything that's in the store that you want to know more about, where did it come from? And so you can always email us, call us, and we'll take down your info and get back to you with all the answers. So, we try to take some of at least that time out of shopping for the people who, try to wade through the jungle of products which are available nowadays. So these are just some of our local makers. We like to highlight them. And so all of these are either in Chicago or regional. They're all sustainable. They and are just incredible to work with. So we work with multiple local coffee roasters in Chicago, and we work with a couple of tea companies as well, which is, and the more local, the better. So, our coffee companies, they bring us coffee either in big burlap bags or in, reusable containers, and then we put them into ours and give them back, and then they, there's zero packaging involved in our tea and coffee that we sell in the store. So it comes straight from the roasting house straight to us, usually on the same day. So we have some pretty fresh coffee beans, and same with our tea. They're not on there. We just brought on a new tea company. She's a really lovely woman and she's from China, and she goes back to China and searches out the most sustainable tea growers that you can find in China. It's very pricey tea because every single season she has the batches tested on her own. So it's well beyond USDA organic. So, and if there's any kind of chemical residue, she rejects the batch. So it's the most clean tea that I've ever heard of. So she goes to great lengths, and that's Volition tea. So she's, the standards are just incredible. So it's available. Unfortunately, again, there's a price associated with following these values, but the more people who are able to support it, that do support it, the more that we can bring those prices down, hopefully, and make it the norm. Ideally, we try to say, we're not a competitive industry at all. We were the first in Chicago, and now there's 3 more zero-waste stores that have opened in Chicago, and we've done our best to help and guide each one of them and share our vendors, share our info. We need more. The bigger the community, the more waste we're gonna get rid of, and there's room, I think, for everyone to survive as long as no one's, again, thinking community minded instead of competitively minded. There's, the more available it is, the more popular it is, which means the more and more people that are gonna start shopping, with stores like ours. So for us, we say the more the merrier. Just don't open up in our block. And again, so then, and it's also kind of, if we're all buying from the same coffee houses, if we're all buying from the same places locally, then they're stronger. They're able to reduce their prices. We're able to reduce our prices. So it just becomes this cyclical thing of everyone supporting each other and helping each other grow, and then in turn being able to help the community by lowering the cost of things, which is just really cool to watch. This is a resource I wanted to share with everyone. It's a resource for literally all things sustainable in Chicagoland. They're called the Chicago Environmentalists. And I just screenshot, this is from their website. So, shops, restaurants, groceries, agriculture, composting, transportation, just about anything. They have put together the most comprehensive website I have ever seen, and even an interactive map of where you can recycle hard to recycle items. And so if you're looking to figure out, just about anything in terms of sustainability in Chicagoland, then this is a great place to go. So we haven't done it yet, but we're about to link to them on our website as well. They're a nonprofit. They're so nonprofit they haven't even registered yet. So it's just right now it's just 3 women that are doing it for free out of their own passion and care for the environment and for Chicago. They run a great group on Facebook where people, ask questions and give advice and share things. And so they'll be a nonprofit in the next couple months. They're working on their registration, but if you're looking for resources, then they are the place to go for Chicago and the surrounding suburbs. And then for us, things that we do, like that we offer in our store, hard to recycle things. We work with TerraCycle. I know they have kind of a iffy reputation. They did kind of let everyone back behind the curtain, I guess, to see what they do with all of the different things that they recycle. So right now we're a drop-off point, which means like we have to apply and be accepted for people to be able to come and bring these things to us. So we do the Colgate program, the Gillette program. We have a hot hair tool program. So all of these different things, also big pens, even watercolors, glue sticks, all of these things we can take and we send it to them and they recycle it and reuse the parts and things like that. So it's a big mess and it takes up a ton of space, but we do it because we because we care. And also EcoShip. So EcoShip is a Chicago nonprofit, and they take gently used shipping materials and they redistribute it to small businesses all over Chicagoland, which is really a huge labor of love. I mean, we fill up, they usually come, I think, bi-weekly to a lot of places, but we've asked them now to come weekly because, I mean, we have boxes that are this wide and this tall, squares, and we fill them up in less than a week, almost every week consistently. They're just full and overflowing of shipping materials, which is pretty telling, I guess, of how much we're shipping as consumers. And then they redistribute it. So a lot of times, like if we're shipping something, we'll just take from the box because we're a small business, so we might as well, and we ship in those materials. And that way, instead of having to go and buy all these new mailers and stuff like that, small businesses can just reuse what's there, and it's a win-win for everyone. And there's a number of drop-off points all over the city, and I think they also have some in Evanston now too. So if you have any mailers or bubble wrap, things like that, you can save them and drop them off to them, and they'll find a good home. Oops, I went too far. And then just talking about our product line. So we have some products that are made also overseas in Turkey. So I've spent a lot of time in Turkey and have worked with some very small makers over there. So we produce extremely sustainably made things over there, and we started a project with some women during the pandemic when no one was able to work, and a lot of the women, like more on the outskirts of cities and in poor areas, their husbands weren't allowed to go to work anymore, and everyone was kind of panicking. And the friend of mine that I work with on some other Turkish products we were discussing these women and what can we do, and she was saying they were getting together and crocheting things and wanting to sell them. So we kind of made a bit of a women's group and started creating some sustainable, compostable, like sponges and different things like that as a way for them to earn while their husbands weren't allowed to go to work. And then it just kind of took off from there. So we've just kept it going with them, and it's been great fun. And we use all locally sourced Turkish cotton. But that's been also we focus on natural materials, obviously. Cotton for things that are going to be used for a very long time. But what we found is that cotton is really being overused. Considering the amount of water that it takes up and the space that it takes to grow and the nutrients in the soil and things like that. So there was a study done in Denmark about the sustainability of using cotton grocery bags, because I think that people tend to focus on, and studies and things, we tend to focus on the end of life of a product. So yes, a cotton bag, when it's finally, full of holes and unrepairable, will biodegrade, which is amazing. But the amount of energy and resources taken to make that bag is not sustainable at all, considering its purpose. So it would actually, in terms of the creation side of things, for let's say an organic cotton grocery bag to be as sustainable as a plastic grocery bag, not the end of life, mind you, but the creation of it, you'd have to use it approximately 21,000 times. Considering the water and the resources and the labor and everything considered, in making it. For a non-organic cotton bag, that comes down to about 8,000 times. But we're still talking about, like, you probably have to use your great-great-grandma's shopping bag for it to be as sustainable as a plastic one in the terms of creation. So we've just decided that, okay, no, and we hadn't realized that until the study came out. A lot of it is learning as you go, as we all are. So we said, okay, we're gonna pivot. So now we make all of our shopping bags are made out of linen or jute. Jute is way more affordable. But the linen is really nice for like bread and things like that. But jute and linen are both made, they grow extremely fast, and they grow with 9 times, jute is 9 times less water than it takes to grow cotton. And they don't take any chemical inputs, not fertilizers, not pesticides, nothing. They're just extremely hardy, quick growing plants that have multiple harvest times per year. And hemp is also really good in that way. So we're just also kind of trying to influence that change as well, because a lot of times people are like, it's scratchy, like I like the cotton. But it's scratchy, yes, but you don't have to at least put it in your will to make it sustainable. So we kind of are, as we learn, we like to share it, and I think that it's a big learning experience for everyone, and we can all learn together, and that's also the importance of community. So I hope it doesn't come off as just a big promo for our store. We would love to have you all, but just in general about trying to find stores like ours near you, and I think more and more will be popping up as the years go on, and generally, like, even influencing change in the bigger chains. That's the ideal, right? Is to make, Whole Foods kind of go back to its roots and be sustainable once again, and force some of these big guys to just do what's right. And so that's, it takes research, it takes communication, it takes everybody learning from each other. So we try to share everything that we learn with anyone who cares to hear it. And and just try to make at least our little community in Chicago, and as wide as we can spread it, a little bit more sustainable, and make the planet hopefully livable for the next generations to come.
Thank you so much. In just a minute, we'll be having some Q&A period, and folks who are in the room can line up here to speak into the microphone. Folks who are watching online, you can enter your question into the text chat. But before we do that, we're going to have a brief musical interlude so you can think of all those questions you want to ask. And we also suggest making a donation if you're able to. $5 or whatever is comfortable for you helps keep the society running, and we really depend on all of you and your time and energy too in volunteering to help keep EHS vital and vibrant. Thank you. go ahead, if you have questions and you're here in person, please use the microphone over to the side. And again, if you're watching online, go ahead and type them in the chat and I'll read them back to Bethany. So, welcome.
Thank you so much. You mentioned during your conversation post-World War II at one point. I was thinking kind of continuously through your talk how we've lost kind of that era of consciousness of reuse. What is it like to reflect on that we had it but have lost it?
Ooh. I mean, I think it's just, it's incredibly sad what we've lost. And I think that we're already paying for it and we'll continue to pay for it for a number of generations in terms of like the cost. I mean, not only to our the local, our ecosystems and the planetary effects, but also to human health. You know, all these studies now coming out that there's microplastics in our bloodstream and all of these horrible things. So I think it's just, it's pretty, I try not to think about it too much. Because I think that it can get really a bit, you know, heavy. If you really think on it a lot, it can get really heavy and a bit depressing, a lot depressing, and just kind of make things seem a bit hopeless. So I try to focus on what can be done and what can we reverse and how can we change things moving forward. Because the loss is just so great. But the knowledge is still there. We have, one of the things that I love in the store is the huge range of ages that we have. So I mean, we have customers from 10 years old to 90 years old. So, and the thing that we get from our older customers is just that, oh, this is how I used to do things when I was a kid, and this is so great to see it come back. And so it's not so far gone that it's out of living memory. So I think that's something to keep in mind. That's also incredible when you think about how much damage has been done in such a short amount of time. But I think that also can give hope that the knowledge is still there, and we might not be able to reverse everything that's happened, but we can at least change our trajectory into a better direction. Thank you for your question.
My question is, how do you specifically feel about the ethical consumption movement, and how is that different than slow shopping? And then I have another question is, we are a meat-eating household. We are trying to go down to eating meat half of the week, maybe, but I've been having a really difficult time finding like a butchery that sources ethically raised animals. So if you have any recommendations, or if you know like any tips for trying to navigate that, that would be great.
Sure. Actually, wait, I'm going to hold on to you. I'm not familiar with the ethical consumption movement. Yeah, could you tell me a little bit about
So there's a big push to encourage people to buy and shop more sustainably, but there are also lots of arguments happening for and against it. Ethical consumption, like you were just saying, is more difficult to access, and it's not really accessible. And then there's a lot of shaming for people who are shopping from fast fashion brands or like buying stuff that isn't necessarily the best for the environment.
Right.
So there's like a whole movement happening to push people in that direction, but that comes with a lot of shaming and not necessarily addressing the issues with accessibility.
Right.
Financially, like finding a place that even sources it, right? There are 4 stores in this city. There are some like larger grocery stores that have sections where you could go and pick stuff out. You know, like at Mariano's, you can go and like dump some stuff out, but that's like nuts or candy,
Right.
which isn't like everyday meals and food.
Right.
So kind of the dichotomy of like having a whole movement pushing towards like trying to be more ethical, but not being ethical because there's not equity in that system, because we're not considering all of the accessibility issues addressed.
That's an amazing question, and that's something we struggle with every single day, is how do we become more accessible, because it's, you know, like what I was talking about, when you follow all of your values, things get expensive, because, and then it comes down to like, it's like chicken and the egg, because And it's like this like cyclical problem of like, if we're paying the people who produce the things that we want to sell fairly, then other people in our neighborhood who are not paid fairly can't afford to buy the things made by people who are paid fairly. So it's a big problem. And so for us right now, we're working on our being eligible to accept SNAP benefits, which will at least kind of open things up a bit to more of the community. I think shaming people is absolutely, I mean, in any circumstance is never what you want to do. And not what should be done. I think there are, maybe, an alternative to fast fashion is secondhand stores and things like that. And then trying to keep that under control, because now I know secondhand stores have become so popular that they're raising their prices. Which is just, I don't know, it's just so sad and so against the point of it. So I think it's an ongoing struggle and an ongoing battle. So I think, it should be accessible to everyone, and making it more accessible to everyone is kind of the question of the hour. And that goes along with also, people who can afford it, continuing to support it, and in greater numbers to be able to pull the prices down to make it more widely accessible. Number one, I think one thing we're looking at is looking deeper at some ingredients and trying to figure out, like, are some of the less expensive ingredients, have they been, kind of canceled without enough reason, like how much greenwashing out there is there within formulations and things like that. So we're kind of looking, not to make it a green beauty conversation, but we're looking at, like, how bad is SLS actually? It's gotten this horrible reputation, but it's extremely inexpensive. And, when you're sourcing all of your soaps without it, it gets real expensive. So we're looking at how can we find a sustainably sourced version, and we're working with a formulator to make sure it's in the low enough, so that those kind of things, like taking a second look at things that are less expensive and making sure that they're not being overlooked for the wrong reasons to try and bring down prices as well. For us personally, we're looking at a number of avenues, because accessibility really is such a problem, and it's just really, there's nothing like, I don't know, it's just a really bad day for us when someone's like, I really want to shop with you, but I can't afford it. It's just like, that's the worst thing that we ever have to hear, and we do hear it. And some things we carry are, much less expensive, or they have like a greater upfront cost, but then they last a lot longer, or, it leads to less cost over time. But some people don't have the upfront, ability to put more money in upfront and wait for that, to happen. So we try to, keep a running list in our mind of the things that will save you money, and say you can start with these things because it'll save you money now today, and then some things we're working on bringing the price down, so, we can't compete with Ajax dish soap, like it's just not going to happen. But we are working on at least competing with some of the other brands, and so I think it's about being understanding, and also looking at, and kind of talking to people about their behaviors, like, are you shopping fast fashion because it's literally the only thing you can afford, or is it the only thing you can afford because you want to never wear the same outfit twice? So, and kind of looking at people's, reasoning for doing things, and saying, kind of seeing where you can fit sustainability into a model that's accessible for, individual situations. And, we can't expect anyone to be perfect. We just need everyone to try and do better than what they're doing, and hopefully that'll just continue on. And again, hopefully not the long-term goal, the medium-term goal is to make this so widespread that the cost starts coming down. Because it just shouldn't be that way for anyone. Like, for along the whole supply chain, it shouldn't be that to do things the right way is so crazy expensive that it's only accessible to a certain aspect of the population. Like, it's really backwards. So. Oh, sorry. Oh, meat. Thank you. Yes. So meat, gosh, there are a few butchers in Chicago. Out here, I'm not so certain. I think in some instances, it can be a drive. Like you got to go out to the countryside. There's a place that my parents go to that called Reams, and that's where they get their meat and a lot of their dairy products, which is like it's its own farm and its own store, and they have well, I mean, well treated animals, I guess, let's say. So that, and there are other farms around like that. So I would say that's, which unfortunately, is a drive. But then there's also, I think discussions happen, and that's one thing that a couple of local businesses that we've been talking about is we need a sustainable butcher shop. We need a sustainable produce market, like in our area, to kind of. So I think having those conversations with small business owners and coming up with these ideas, because we all kind of talk and to try and create, that make one available, longer term, to influence that in your community. But I think it's a bit of a drive to the farms these days, unfortunately.
I have a question from our online audience. So one person had asked about the commercially compostable. What does that mean? And someone actually answered it and said because home composting doesn't get hot enough.
Right.
But then they had a follow-up question. Because those commercially compostable materials require special facilities, are there any newer compostable plastics that could be composted in a home setting?
Not that I know of so far. So for all of the compostable plastics that I have, unless there's something very new that I haven't heard about yet, but as of within the last few months, there's nothing that's not industrial compost. But I do think that that's one area where we're making a lot of progress is these kind of compostable materials, which again also kind of have their other negative sides as well. But there is a lot of innovation in that area, so I'm thinking it won't take forever to get there. I do hope it comes up soon. Toothbrush bristles is another one that's an issue.
Thank you so. Let me take this off briefly. Thank you so much for your talk. Love your store. Like the biggest fan. Tell everybody about it. So thanks for coming to talk. My question is actually being also an avid listener of podcasts, there's always been advertisers now for these really trendy, eco-friendly sounding, but mass shipped things. Like for example, speaking of composting, like Lomi something where you can compost super fast at home, super convenient, or like Blue Land. We'll ship you all these soaps and then you can use our reusable stuff. For those, they sound really great, and I would like to try them, but at the same time, there's, as you were talking before about shipping costs and other things, how actually sustainable are these items that tend to be advertised to a national audience, so to speak? Yeah.
Ooh. Lomi, my brother has one. He seems to like it. I don't know how long the battery lasts. That's kind of my new research tunnel that I've fallen into lately, is how terrible batteries are, long term, and mining the resources needed to make all those batteries. So I think going electronic and personal use electronic for every single little thing is not necessarily the most sustainable or advisable, just because of the battery issue. Sorry, I keep aiming this way. I think some of the shipping, the Blue Land and things that you're talking about like that. Blue Land, a lot of it is tablet form, so I think it's not too bad. I try to think of it as I'd be driving to the store to get those things anyway. The trucks are already shipping, Lord knows, tons of stuff every day, so I don't think it adds necessarily too much, especially if it's small. I think when you get into shipping liquids, shipping soaps and things like that, that's where you really start racking up the carbon miles, especially because the majority of soaps are 85% water. So I think the concentrates are at least a nice alternative to that, and so I think they do have a pretty good impact on reducing the carbon emissions, just because you're taking out water. Like water's really heavy. So, and that's like another thing then when you get into like glass versus plastic. Glass is really heavy to ship, and there's a lot of breakage and a lot of loss when you do glass. So that's why, now plastic has kind of become so popular because it's lighter, it's easier to ship, it doesn't break as easily, things like that. I read somewhere recently that the most sustainable is like the pouches, the plastic pouches, because they're way less plastic and very light and not easily ruptured and things like that. Yeah, so we're, working on that, but I think concentrates are probably your best bet if you don't have a store where you can refill, near you, or a store like we carry a lot of concentrated tablets and stuff for cleaners and such. But if you don't have that near you and you need to like ship to your house, then concentrates is your best bet for sure.
Thank you very much for your talk and for what you're doing. Big fan. I always think about the edges. In my world of food, I have two edges that I live with. One is a child with celiac disease, well, an adult with celiac disease. And so like plastic is my friend, and all the words on the packaging are my friend. And I don't know how viable that is when the food is out in the world. So I'm wondering, A, how it works with food allergies. The other place I spend a lot of food time is at a food pantry. Mm-hmm. And the amount of plastic that's used there on purpose, by design, to your point, to meet rules and codes and keep food, blah, 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 it's exhausting in a day. And I don't know how hard it is to change those kinds of rules and expectations. Footnote to that one, how do we get food to people who need it, who can't afford any food in this paradigm?
Absolutely. Excellent questions. The food allergy, particularly severe food allergies, is still a bit of a conundrum in terms of shopping in bulk. Because I'm sure, as you know, like for someone with very severe celiac disease, like even the littlest particles can set off a really severe attack. So, for example, so we sell wheat products in the store. So we have allergen warnings up because I think if you have really severe celiacs, it's, everything is separated, everything is cleaned, everything is, things like that, but we can't guarantee. Same with really severe nut allergies, because we sell peanuts, we sell tree nuts. Especially when you're doing that and stuff is falling and it's creating dust, that is still a challenge that we're working through. We have gluten-free pasta that could be washed, so that's probably pretty safe. Like there are some things which would be safe, within reason, within caution. Some things are probably we sell gluten-free oats, but oats are naturally gluten-free, but they're usually processed in facilities which have wheat products. So then, anything that's processed in a facility with wheat has to be processed in its own room with its own ventilation system. However, then when it comes to us, it's not we don't process it in a room with its own ventilation system or sell it in a room with its own ventilation system. So it becomes, if you have a more mild, a gluten intolerance or a mild gluten allergy, you're probably fine. But if you have a very severe gluten allergy, then we never recommend, just because we can't guarantee, and we do the best we can, but it's an area that's still that's difficult to navigate, unfortunately. I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer for you. Food pantries and the plastics there. I think, I guess, let's see, because I've done a lot more in soup kitchens as opposed to food pantries, but we do donate, things to, before their expiration dates come up, anything extra we have. There's a food pantry down the street and another one that one of our teammates works with, and so we donate anything there. But I'm not really sure what happens to it. We donate it in the package that it came in, or we bring our bucket over to them and they take it into theirs. So in terms of reducing plastics there, I guess, is it just that they repackage everything into plastic?
Yes, and they wrap pallets. They have to wrap their pallets up and all this.
Pallet wrapping is a huge issue that we face constantly, and we've been trying to figure out what to do. So our soap manufacturer right now has switched. They're still testing out the best ways to do it, but they're switching to straps, and then we keep the straps. And when the next shipment comes, we give them back, and they bring them. And so they've worked something out with their trucking company. So now we're working on straps, at least with that. Our food companies, one of them that has to come, so we don't order very frequently from them at all anymore. Like, we've taken, we're always looking for more and more like hyper local food distributors, and we found a really good one. So we either will pick it up or they bring it on a truck, and it's local, so it's no longer wrapped in plastic. But we used to face that too with food. A lot of our food is grown on the West, like as a country, like on the West Coast, and so when you're trucking things that far, they wrap it in plastic. So, and we've been trying to think, like, what could we do innovatively, you know, like, what did they, and always it comes back to like what you were saying, like, what did they used to do? Like, we used to do these things and we didn't have all this plastic. So, like, what was it before? And I think it was probably straps and burlap, I would imagine, a lot of burlap wrapping and then reusing that. So it's something I keep asking about, but I think, you know, plastic is so cheap, like plastic, you know, so it's hard to convince places to increase their budget just for pallet wrap, but we are working on it.
So we're getting close to the top of the hour, so this will be our last question.
Okay.
Hi. Thanks for your presentation.
Thank you.
Could you, I think the way that you described your business was a zero waste general store.
Mhm.
Is that a business that is kind of coming back in recent years in America? Like, are you recognizing other businesses kind of similar to your own? If that's a kind of a thing that's gaining some popularity?
It is, yeah, absolutely. Even just in the 3 years since we started, you know, we have just they're popping up everywhere now. So I think it's definitely a very growing movement. And we have a group that we all talk in about, like, trying to give advice and share ideas and share suppliers that fit within kind of our shared values and things like that. So, I would say that group has doubled, if not tripled, in the last 3 years that I've been in it. So it's definitely a very growing movement in Europe as well. Although I have been noticing like a slightly scary trend where, in talking to some store owners in Europe, they're seeing a lot of closures as well, as the economy is not doing well and people have to reprioritize things, and, you know, so it was kind of growing. Now it was shrinking over in Europe a little bit now, but in the US I would say it's still definitely growing. So I think, but with the economy the way it is right now, the pricing issue is a constant. It's constantly on everyone's mind, and not only just to make it more accessible to everyone, but to survive with the inflation the way it is right now. And but to answer your question, yes, I would say it's a very growing movement in the U.S. particularly.
Thank you so much. Join me in thanking Bethany. So I'm closing. I wanted to share a quote by Canadian philosopher Marshall McLuhan. "There are no passengers on Spaceship Earth. We are all crew." Thank you.